Yeah, hello everybody. I am Eric Oestrich. I work at Smart Rent with Frank and John. I see him here. Uh, yeah, I've been working on NervesHub more or less since I started about 5, 6 months ago, whenever that was. um, so yeah, a lot of working on that. So if we'll just share my screen and start taking a look at what all is new. So this is just a local instance at the current moment, but the some of the big things. Um, Apparently, I didn't. So like the homepage is now gone. So a lot of NervesHub is being like stripped out of the like public version to just be something that you run as your company. So stuff like the homepage. There's eventually these organizations I'm hoping to get rid of for different kind of Smart Rent is using them as access control, more or less. So turning them into it's like this product to have a like environment that's like a staging or a production or a QA or a development or whatever. So just kind of that all is still pretty future and down the road. But for some stuff that is new, so some of these filters are new. You can do by platform now, so it's like all kind of boring stuff. But the bulk actions is a little different. This shows off kind of one of the big changes, one of the big first changes. So devices now have penalty boxes, and you can enable and disable firmware. So previously it was a single quarantine that you could put a device into, or the system would put it into. So now the system will make it in the penalty box, or as John liked to say, a sin bin. But that will clear after, I think, 24 hours. Yeah. So after 24 hours, it'll just kind of go away and the device can try again to update. So the main reason for that is like if you have a cellular connection and it just kind of flakes while updating, the device is still working and it could do it, but maybe it's in a better situation tomorrow, or there's just less cell traffic or whatever. So that's one of the reasons for the penalty box. And then you can also just disable device updates. So that'll look different. So this looks different than what the penalty box looks like. This will be yellow if the device is in a penalty box, just to show that like in development mode, maybe you just don't want deployments happening on this at all, and so you can just flat out turn them off. Turn them back on for now, though. Another big change, since I kind of mentioned it, so deployments are now assigned to a device. So previously, any deployment that when you updated it would just fire out to anything that matched the tags. When a device connects now, it will try and assign itself. So it'll kind of pick the deployment. It's either just kind of the first one that Postgres returns or more specific. I don't remember if we'd added the more specific yet. So like if you have a bunch of tags, the one that has more tags in the deployment should match first. I'm not sure if that actually happens. So, but now you can see what it's actually attached to. And if you have a bunch of deployments that could match this, you'll see it up here as well. So a lot of this is to prevent. I ran into it, and we've run into it as the company, but dueling deployments. So if you happen to have two tags, like if this had more than one tag and both of them matched, like two deployments matched this device, whichever one was first would update it, would reboot, not match that deployment again, but match the other deployment, and then update to whatever that version was, and it'll just kind of cycle forever. So that's no good. So now devices are assigned to a deployment, and when they're assigned to a deployment, that lets you do kind of neat things like in-flight updates. So these are our rolling updates, which me just trigger this so you can kind of watch it now. So these are a bunch of x86 nerves devices in QEMU that I have on 2 boxes that are just kind of here to be a test platform for NervesHub. So you can see it's kind of changing. They're all updating. The progress bar is going. So this is the most recent thing that NervesHub has acquired. So this, as we saw, is the other day someone posted a picture of like 200,000%, I think. So this is a very rough guesstimate. Like the total percentage is the number of devices when you updated that, and then it just kind of Postgres increments it. So this is a best guess than an actual, because doing the actual is a lot harder, as you might expect. Let's see, there's a few new buttons up here. You can now force a reconnect. That this actually showed off another piece. Currently, when you reconnect a device, whether it's flaky or not, it'll skip the rolling deployment and just update. So that's a way to, there's a reason we have that, which is just a lot easier to keep at this current moment than figure out what we wanted to do for that. There's an identify button. I can't actually, I can show you. Maybe. Oh, okay, so I'm gonna come over here. But the identify button will send a message to NervesHub link, and you can set it to do really whatever you want. I have those set to blink an LED, so that you can just know that you're like looking at this, and when you click console, you're like looking at the same thing as what's like in front of you. Let's see, other fun things. There's now you can put in code that gets sent when a device reconnects. So if we open up the console and let's make this fun. Well, looks like it just updated. I guess when this comes back, we'll actually get to watch this there. So the NervesHub itself input outputs high, and ran some little things. So this is nice to have if you're trying to like debug a device that is in the field and only connects for like 3 minutes at a time every 20 minutes, and you don't really know what's going on with it. You can just put in this little thing. You can write up whatever you want, and like as long as you have this console open, it'll bump out, and you can kind of keep track of it. You can now push a specific version, so you don't need a deployment. So like if we wanted to just update this to this version, we'll click that. It'll go ahead and update. It also disables firmware updates for you, so that should remove it from a deployment. Nope, cool. So this will just prevent updates from the deployment going forward. So here we can also see it did the outputs high. So deployments also have the code on connect. So this way you can just kind of mass set it if it's a bunch of devices that you know have like a similar problem. You can set the concurrent number of updating devices. So the SR hubs behind me, I have set to 2 at a time because they're like a thick brick of Wi-Fi that if you do all 12 at once, it's a random mess of which ones actually get to update. So let's see. You also notice there's no more limits as part of like moving towards a hosted by your company. So there's really no reason to like limit to 1 million devices or whatever if it's your own company. I feel like that kind of catches us up to what has happened. I'm sure I missed something. But kind of in the future, my next step is to start working towards making NervesHub be okay with like connecting to MQTT, specifically AWS IoT. But the main reason behind this is we want to, so like right now we have the WebSocket and an MQTT connection for like the server application that we have. So that both of them have their own keep alives. And if it's going over cellular, that's a decent amount, like it's a duplication of a keep alive pings that we have to pay for. So if we can just cut that to one, then that should help reduce cost and all that fun stuff. And so that's kind of the main push towards that. And then we also don't have to deal with ops not necessarily liking WebSocket connections when we rolling deploy and have a thundering herd. But yeah, so that's the future there. So we're going to start setting up that we can kind of talk via MQTT, because really the only thing that NervesHub needs to do, the console will still be a WebSocket, but so it needs to be able to say like, hey, go connect to the console WebSocket, like you have an update, are you online? And like maybe a few other things, but like those are kind of the basic things, and all that can be accomplished via MQTT. So yeah, and that will also be kind of an opt-in feature, so you won't need it, is my hope. Or at least I would like to run it. The other thing I forgot is you can now self-host with a set of scripts that I wrote. It's just a tiny little bash script. So it's kind of a best effort, but it runs on a single image or a single like VPS type thing. You just kind of run run like the bash script setup, fill in some secrets, and run some like OpenSSL cert commands and that kind of stuff. And then you should have a working image and secured and all that fun stuff with Let's Encrypt. And it should be easily kept updated, because the thing will also deploy it as well, obviously. Yeah, so that's kind of the whirlwind tour of what's changed and kind of where we're headed. Really the big thing of where we're headed is just to be able to support like tens to hundreds of thousands of devices easily. So yeah, if anyone has any specific questions, I'm happy to answer them. I'm sure others can jump in. John and Frank, have I missed anything?
I think that you maybe glossed over a lot of the internal changes that you can't see.
Yeah.
Like a lot of code has been deleted and simplified based on the past several years of learnings.
One thing I'm very proud of, all of my contributions to SmartRent is still negative. Frank said I couldn't do it with rolling deployments, and I'm still almost 3,000 ahead in the negative. But yeah, we deleted. There's a lot of just kind of stuff that made sense for like the public version that I just got to like flat out delete. There's a lot of like user cert stuff that made sense at one point, and it just didn't at this current moment because it was never used. There's like some console, there's like two versions of the console that tricked me for a while. I was trying to like debug an issue, so I got to just like delete the live view version since we have the X term now. Yeah, so just lots of simplifications and yeah, deleting lots of stuff. The rolling updates happen via a little process that sits on each node. So I think we have 4 to 6 device nodes in production for SmartRent, and so like you'll at least have more than one probably for your production app. So each one will have its own deployment orchestrator. So when a device connects, the device tells you, like, talks to that orchestrator. And that's the thing that will kind of capture those deployment updates and like start to send out as the rolling update happens.
Wait, what is a node in this case?
A node in that specific case is an ECS task, which I believe that was another thing. I got to archive a whole bunch of repos. So previously, if you had tried hosting with the scripts, Terraform stuff, I think it set it up in ECS as like a Fargate node type node. So it's just kind of like if you have a Kubernetes pod, or you just like cluster things yourself. So I guess the long story short is it's a Beam node. So like a Beam instance that is all clustered together.
Okay.
Yep.
So can you run NervesHub just from a single Beam instance, or does it require multiple?
Yeah. So a lot of my own work has gone to like making it so you can like, so this is NervesHub.dev. This is my personal instance. So this is on a single image. It's all one node now. We are pretty close to being able to lose the API node if you're hosting it yourself currently, because the web router has I just rehosted the API router as /API/whatever is there. So that way we can just kind of reduce spinning parts and all that fun stuff. So yeah, it should be pretty easily hosted as a single image, or a single instance. Previously, we had 3 Docker images, one for each node type. And then I got it so there's just one Docker container. So now the same thing will be run either as a web, an API, or device. And you can also set it to all. So if you just want to have like a load balancer with 2 VPSs behind it and they both run everything, like you could do that pretty easily, I think. It's not provided for you, so you have to do that yourself, but I think it should be doable.
This is pretty cool. I use NervesHub probably every day, excluding Saturday and Sunday, of course, although sometimes, we have those unlucky Saturday and Sundays. So this is really awesome to see. I just wanted to say, you don't always see people use it, but I and a few other people at SparkMeter, we are big NervesHub users. So thanks for all the work.
Yeah, I will say there is. I don't actually know how the migration from the previous maintenance release to now V1 mate to this will be. I was trying to keep it pretty up to date until about February, I think, when I started. I switched. I de-umbrellaed it, so now it's just one Elixir app. And somewhere around that point, it became way too much of a pain to try and copy stuff back over. So it's a hard fork of sorts, but I think like I would still probably do this in like a staging environment, but there's one migration that I didn't actually look into it, but between the SmartRent fork that became the 2.0 and the V1 maintenance, there was one migration that one of them had that the other didn't, that was just like, I can't delete the thing that's already deleted. So it might be fine.
Yeah. Well, all the changes except the MQTT one I'm excited about.
Yep.
So yeah, the access control, moving away from kind of the shared public thing to more of a self-hosted, super interesting. One thing which could be interesting and is probably an easy one is, sometimes we're curious to look across our fleet what is the distribution of firmware and like which devices haven't upgraded. So maybe some overview metrics could be a super easy, quick win.
Yeah. So in some sense, that kind of some of that will be with this. So you can see what percentage hasn't happened yet. There's no button to go look at the things that are attached to a deployment yet. But that's mostly because I haven't done it. Like this is a field in the database. We can easily sort by it or whatever. So, but you can, filter on firmware now. So as long as this is uploaded, you can say like what x86 ones are on the old version. So it's not exactly what you asked for, but it's at least a easy enough thing that exists right now that kind of gets you close.
Yeah. One other thing we do interestingly with tags, I think, is we have a couple, free form tags. Someone will write like stuff or something, and you're just like, what does that mean? But the other thing we do is we have a deployment specific tag. And then we also have like a location specific tag, because sometimes you log in and you look at the serial number and you're like, okay, I don't know what that means unless I have this other tab open. So we're not always good at updating that. It'd be nice. I think we're thinking about getting like an integration where our main systems then tell NervesHub this serial number is this more human readable place. I guess for you guys, it'd probably be like apartment 1B and like 52 Water Street, so maybe not as useful, but just an interesting use case. I think that it's a practical way of how we use tags.
Yeah, and I know I mentioned to Frank once that we should have like a location field that we would just put like what apartment complex it's in or whatever. But then he threw back at me that like you could do that with tags. So you can't do it yet because it rejects spaces, I think, and I'm not sure why, other than John gave some past history of it was spaces and then became commas, and there might be bad data somewhere. So for some historical reason that's in place, but I want to kind of make it with like kind of that in mind. One thing that's kind of in the back of my head that I don't know when it will happen, but I think it would be cool to have like the AWS style tagging of like location : like the thing or whatever, like where it's at. I'd like Datadog does that too. But I think that might be cool.
That's what we. Yeah. We do something. It's like at : and then the place it's at, and then. And then another thing is, the audit log has just so much useful information. But I feel like I never look at it. Or I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of good stuff there. It could be something to show either.
A lot of good stuff. Yeah, 245.
You're like,
pages.
well, why are there 245 pages for this device? Is that because it's connecting a lot, or what is the bulk of those events?
Yeah.
Sometimes that's in other metrics of other systems. Like if it's disconnecting from NervesHub, it's probably disconnecting to your main systems also. But tremendously happy with what's here. Delta firmware updates alone is pretty great.
Yeah, which are currently not working with the rolling deployments, and that's because I purposely didn't copy over one piece. But that's easy enough to have back. The rest of it's still in there. It just won't send a Delta, which might be news to Frank. So there you go.
I'm wondering if anybody's tried to get NervesHub 2.0 running on like their own like cloud setup yet.
I started a few weeks ago, but then I got distracted with some other priorities and didn't click it. So what was meant to be an afternoon project, and there were a couple of things when I realized that the deployment model I think there was like was an example Terraform thing, I think, somewhere that didn't quite work with Nerves 2.0. And then I was like, okay, so I'll start doing this by hand. But didn't quite get there.
Yeah, I guess one other thing with 2.0 is the previous Terraform stuff. I think I have no idea if they worked or not. We had our own.
It may not have even worked originally. Yeah.
Yeah. but so now it's kind of a like the Elixir forum is like full of opinions on how to deploy apps. So it's kind of like, here's an app, it can build a release or a Docker container, and go stick it somewhere. So that's kind of the like if you're using the release script that I wrote, I can probably help you, but that's really only geared towards sticking it on a single box.
That's pretty much what I need right now. I'm just going to probably set up a really lightweight EC2 instance. I had most of our stuff is in Docker Swarm, but I would probably just separate this from that and just do some simple lightweight EC2 instance until I can figure out how much load we actually have.
Yeah, and I don't know what the limit of that is. Just because, I mean, right now there's 200 some things connected to. This is my
You've got a big
development
You've got a bigger
machine.
fleet than I do. I've got 3, so
yeah. So kind of the idea is that like self-hosted is like good for like 50 or below. Like the setup that I had, just like put it somewhere.
Yeah.
But I imagine is pretty scalable up to a few thousand, just because it's like Elixir and the Beam. So.
Yeah, I'm not too worried about it. I'm mainly worried about basically we are migrating some stuff that was kind of a hand-rolled deployment into Nerves, and now I got the Nerves stuff done. I just have to get the Nerves hub auto update taken care of before I consider it kind of production ready.
Yeah, which like as far as so like here's the deployment script working. So it is you'll see it says stopping NervesHub, migrating, starting NervesHub. So there is a like really ugly white page that happens between those. So it's not like it's not zero downtime, but likely it's probably fine for whatever kind of setup this is aiming at. But
it wouldn't matter for our current case because we don't have enough. I mean, first of all, the only time that it would really matter is if we were like remote diagnosing something, and we're probably just not going to deploy a NervesHub update if we're trying to remote diagnose a particular box. So,
yep.
And I have a follow-up question. Is it conceptually possible to deploy NervesHub on Nerves?
So
Yes.
I don't have the actual experience with that, but John did spend time actually doing that.
I did get very frustrated with Ubuntu and this little device, and I did happen to build Postgres for Nerves, and I did happen to start it.
Nice.
However, it's very involved. Postgres setup is just really involved. It's not an easy process. So
You guys got it far enough to troll me with names for calling it.
Yeah.
Right.
Nerves Netties is what we were calling it.
Yeah. Never Netties, Nerver Netties.
Nerve Netties. You deploy Nerves with NervesHub with NervesHub.
Yeah. I wonder if you can use the same instance. You probably could use the same instance to update itself.
And I never used NervesHub before, so the question might not be relevant, but is there any way that you can set the storage for firmwares? It looks like you are going forward with quite a lot of, let's say, focus on AWS, for instance. Is there a way that you can set a S3 bucket for firmwares?
Yeah, so firmware for production by default is S3 buckets. It doesn't upload directly to it, so because NervesHub will do some like firmware checks to make sure that devices will actually accept it, so like that it's signed properly and all that stuff. But it will land in S3 and provide, I think, signed links. Good for, I don't know, an hour or something. But there's also a local file storage, and that's what the self-hosted version, like the simple hosted version of NervesHub we'll just use local files. And then obviously development mode will do the same. But as far as things other than S3, that is at least not on my roadmap. But we're using XAWS directly, so it'll be a little tricky, but I'm sure if you have a will, there's a way. So
how exactly will it work with the signing, pre-signing S3? I'm asking because in the past I worked with for a connected car platform, and we were, due to the LTE traffic, we were obligated to update devices only when the, let's say, the trip of a car ended. So it was not always now for all the devices, but it was for specific devices. Is there any other options, or when you upload? Okay.
The NervesHub client has you can add a custom module to write your own function that says whether it's okay to update that device or not.
Ah, okay. Okay, thanks.
Yep. Yeah. So NervesHub will just tell the device to update, and then it's kind of up to the device after that. It will hog kind of the rolling update spot currently, but that's about it. Otherwise, it will just kind of. One of the other things that does remind me, the quarantine used to work on when the device was told, and now it's whenever we get a percentage back, we get counted against it. So only when the device actually starts to update will we consider it as part of like the penalty box check. So hopefully that should help. I know we had a few devices flaking between LTE and like Wi-Fi, kind of back and forth, and just like placing themselves in quarantine for like no good reason while they were updating. Let's see if there's an example sitting here, but you just had this update available, so you can reschedule it in a minute here. So you'd have your own like LTE check or whatever, like if it's good to do it, or just like push it a minute down the road.
As you've been updating this to handle more and more devices, where has the scaling been? Has it been like a database thing? Has it been more of a compute for the Elixir side? Has it been the Thundering Herd kind of situation?
Yeah, so I haven't done too much with scaling yet. MQTT is also kind of an excuse for us as like a scaling thing, because we don't have to deal with the Thundering Herd or anything like that once clients connect to just MQTT. But I do know we had to slowly, so when we do a deployment in production, the web and API nodes will just kind of update as fast as it can, but the device ones will wait 5 minutes between each one before it cycles, just to like let things kind of stabilize between them, so that we don't just like drop everything and then bring back, I don't even know what we're up to now, but a few thousand devices just like all at once, crowding it and firing off a bunch of Ops Genie things and making people upset. So yeah, so that is more kind of the scaling that I'm more interested in fixing right now. Is just like making it so that doing a deployment doesn't have a Thundering Herd type of thing, along with just not having devices directly connect to us until they're ready for a console.
Imagine that you have, like, as you said, 20,000 devices. Is there a way that you can upload, for instance, a list of device IDs to easily start the rolling update on just those?
If I understood your question, you want to like specifically
you have a lot of
devices
right?
or
yeah, you have let's say 20,000 devices, and then based on your let's say sales department, you get a list of 1,000 devices that need a specific firmware. It might be quite awkward to go through the forms and click each of those. Is there a way that you can upload a list, let's say a CSV file with the device IDs, and then those are the subject of update?
Currently, no.
I
But
think what he's getting at is our use of tags. So
Yeah.
like we tag, we tag a group of devices with, we want to update these first because it's like a friendly group of people who are happy with alpha quality software. So we hit them first before the next population.
yeah, so you could take that list of like the CSV of IDs, and kind of the way you do it now with the system as it stands is you could use the API to add tags to it. So you could add the date or whatever, I don't know, and then you'd make a deployment that just goes at that unique tag, and then at that point you could just do a normal update that way. So you'd have to kind of fudge it a bit, but I think you can make it work without too much of a clicking around pain. But it does make me think having this be an API to just send a specific version probably isn't a bad thing to add either. Because these three, I think I added as API actions. So, or reconnect, identify, and console, maybe, I don't know, whatever it is. But adding this as a other one. So I mean, at that point, the the firmware update is entirely on you. So you can really do whatever you want at that point.
So with MQTT coming down the pipe here and you having experienced some of the Thundering Herd problems, do you have any recommendations on where you would say that like cutover point is of where you would want to start thinking about using MQTT versus WebSockets?
Like, I think WebSockets currently works for us and will probably work for a foreseeable future, but we're like really starting to ramp up device counts. And so it's kind of more of a fear of the future than anything hard. Like, we passed 40,000 and now we regret our choice or whatever. It's more like just like seeing down the road and we're going to have like hundreds of thousands of devices and knowing that Thundering Herd when you have many is really bad. So that's just kind of more we're afraid of the future, I guess, than
So Eric,
the current.
If I could add, we're under a lot of our DevOps loves to use AWS a lot, and WebSockets, I'd say, is somewhat of a non-technical feature as well.
I'm super happy that you're adding MQTT, by the way, because we used it with a lot of scale in the past, and it can always work. If you need a WebSocket for a specific thing, it can probably always stay. But MQTT for like sending commands, you have a new firmware and stuff like that. It's awesome.
Yeah,
but I'm just curious about, because AWS IoT can be quite picky with security and certificate authorities and all that. Will it be possible that you can run NervesHub basically and using its logic behind everything and not being exposed to the internet? Because with the use of AWS IoT, you will probably have the main communication channel through that, right? But sending some, let's say, other payloads, at least not for everybody. I mean, never mind.
Yeah. So at least as far as we have the API and the web nodes past whatever walled off behind a VPN. So devices will probably the nodes that the device is connected to will probably always need to be public, because it uses we'll have the console, which will still be a WebSocket. So like WebSockets aren't going away probably ever, but it's at least you can wall off most of NervesHub, I guess, from the internet. which I think sort of glances across the question there.
Mm.
Maybe the other part, it sounds like what you were asking. NervesHub right now does a lot of that certificate validation and pinning, but if we are already doing that with AWS, I think our assumption is that you will trust your source with AWS and not have to go through the same certificates validation with NervesHub as well. So if you're getting your device messaging and payloads and connections through MQTT, then yeah, you wouldn't have to do any more with certificates.
Yeah, and John has felt a lot of the pain of MQTT AWS IoT, and it's trying to rush ahead of me to make sure that is mostly set up. I have no idea how we'll be able to, or even if we can, like export like the IoT rules and all that stuff. So yeah, I don't know. It's all very complicated and currently not in my head, so I don't have to think about it yet.
This is a little bit orthogonal, I guess, but has anybody gotten VernMQ to run on Nerves? I've got some situations where we sort of anticipate customers wouldn't necessarily want us to expose their internal sensors directly to the AWS broker. They might not necessarily have so like my Nerves box may end up being a proxy. I haven't quite figured out the simplest way of getting something like VernMQ on the firmware. I don't know if anybody's done anything like that yet. I know I could probably build a build root package, but that's a little outside of my wheelhouse.
So the
VernMQ is-
MQTT broker would run on a Nerves device on site or something. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So I have, since I already have a device running, if I could get the VernMQ broker, which is written in Erlang, and it's not something that's unhacked, so I can't just like get it as a dependency, but I might be able to use the Elixir make mechanism in Nerves, or I might be able to do something with. I've never built a build root package, so I don't know anything about that. But
Well,
just
I mean, if it's Erlang, you could try adding it as a dependency with the GitHub.
that's possible. Yeah, I mean the problem is that
Rebar-
they use make in their build process instead of rebar, as far as I can tell, because they end up building a few custom binaries, I guess. And I think that was the part that threw me, is like, oh, this isn't just a standard, like a lot of Erlang stuff you can just add as a dependency if it's on Hex, but their build process is a little more complicated.
I know it's sacrilege, but you might be better off putting Mosquito on the Nerves device and just running the MQTT broker.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, maybe faster. I mean, I don't have to, in this particular use case, I don't need it to be, multi-node or anything like that, probably. So it might actually be sensible. Just if there's one that's already got a package.
VernMQ is, as Mike said, it's a broker, so I don't see a point running that on a device. It might be
because the sensor. So we have an use case where there's sensors that are on premise that are basically talking to a broker, and we could hardwire them in our. In the use case where we have complete control over the infrastructure, like if it's in our own lab, we could certainly have devices talking to a public broker. But if I have a factory customer where they really don't want outbound internet connections just going all willy-nilly, except for the ones that we control on our actual box. It's a little bit easier to sell, to say, oh, it's just a local thing, and then it goes to our private cloud solution.
Okay.
That's it. We certainly can run we already have on our telemetry solution an MQTT client that we can configure, but I'm trying to figure out a way to not have to run a separate box for the broker and not have to depend on a public cloud solution. Or I personally don't mind, but some factory customers get really scared about having anything on. In some cases it was difficult to get trust, even just to put on our, sort of isolated solution for them. It's just not so much actual security; it's security politics.
So I'm going to go on a brief rant about MQTT, which is, I'm curious if other people have experienced this. There's just no guaranteed delivery to the broker, but there's just this kind of, depending on how your persistent sessions works or how you have other stuff set up, like we ran into some issues where we were losing messages potentially. I don't know if anybody else has had that problem, but I know it's the industry standard, so I'm sure there's well-defined solutions for that, but that was a pain point for us.
I've worked with industrial PLCs, and those don't support MQTT, but they have the same problem in reverse, where you're polling for data and sometimes they just don't come back with an answer. So, I mean, that's just probably broadly the unreliability of everything.
Yeah. The Thundering Herd is certainly a good situation where let AWS handle all just absorb all these connections and deal with it. That is something I hadn't thought about as much.
I mean, for us, MQTT was working really great, though there was a shock when firstly we used our own broker. We actually played with both, with WERN MQ and EMQ. But then, just for the security reasons, we decided to go with AWS IoT, and it was great. But then we soon realized that this persistence is nowhere to find, obviously, because Amazon wants to sell you some other things. But anyway, we decided to go with Kafka, just to have a buffer from the internet because of all the instability with networks and all that, and to provide some kind of buffer for the back office apps and all that. And it worked really great. So I'm really happy with this IoT integration that you guys are doing.
Cool. So does anybody else have any more NervesHub questions? And if not, we can wrap up the recording and switch to other topics. Well, Eric, thank you very much for this. Awesome to see the new changes coming up in NervesHub 2.0 here. I'm really loving the consolidation of services. That's going to, and the self-hosting, that's going to be super helpful. I know that's been one of the pain points for a long time. So yeah, absolutely awesome work. Thanks, Frank and John and everyone from SmartRent for coming out here and explaining this as well. And this has been great.